A cryptic message and an irresistible promise. What secrets lie waiting to be discovered? It was a rainy Thursday when the letter arrived, its envelope yellowed and edges frayed, as if it had traveled through decades to reach me. The name on the front, Ethan Blackwell, was written in a calligraphy so elaborate I had to trace the letters twice to ensure they spelled my name. I was sitting at my desk, poring over maps and faded journals, hoping for a thread, any thread, that might pull me out of my slump. The last expedition I'd led had ended in disaster, my reputation as an explorer shredded like the sails of the ship we'd abandoned. The letter felt heavier than it should have, almost pulsing with an energy I couldn't explain. When I opened it, the contents were brief. To Ethan Blackwell, the island exists. I can show you the way. It will restore your name or ruin it forever. The choice is yours. Beneath the message was a set of coordinates, an unfamiliar symbol of concentric circles etched into the bottom corner. I spent the rest of the day trying to identify the coordinates. They pointed to a stretch of ocean far from any known shipping lanes, an uncharted area I'd read about in passing, always surrounded by myths of lost ships and strange disappearances. It wasn't long before I contacted Ava Sterling, a historian whose knowledge of legends bordered on obsessive. She arrived at my apartment within an hour of my call, her wide-rimmed glasses slightly askew, and her hair tied back in a messy bun. "You're telling me someone sent you this?" she asked, holding the letter delicately between her fingers as though it might crumble. "Do you recognize the symbol?" I asked. Ava leaned closer, studying it. "I've seen something similar in carvings from ancient seafaring cultures. Concentric circles often symbolize gateways, crossings into other realms or the unknown. But it's never quite like this." Her voice was tinged with excitement, and I could see the gears in her mind turning. "You're thinking of going," she said, her tone half a question, half a statement. "It's the only lead I've had in months," I admitted. "I need this, Ava." She hesitated for a moment before smiling. "Then I'm coming with you. Something about this feels significant." Our third companion joined the next morning, Mark O'Donovan, a financier whose knack for securing funding was matched only by his knack for finding trouble. He arrived in a sleek black car, his suit tailored perfectly despite the early hour. "Ethan, always a pleasure," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his smile calculated. "Heard you've got something big cooking." "You heard right," I replied. Marco's eyes drifted to Ava. "And you must be the brains of this operation. Mark O'Donovan, at your service." Ava rolled her eyes but shook his hand. I handed Marco the letter. He read it quickly, his expression unreadable until he reached the coordinates. "Uncharted territory? I hope you're prepared for the risks." "I've never shied away from risks," I said. "Good," Marco replied. "Because if this pays off, it could be the find of the century. And if it doesn't, well, let's just say I've got a knack for damage control." We secured a small ship and a crew willing to take us close to the coordinates. As we sailed out of port, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were leaving more than the shore behind. The ocean seemed to change as we ventured further, the waves growing calmer and the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. The crew began to whisper about the unnatural stillness, their nervous energy infectious. "Something feels off," Ava said as she stood beside me at the bow. I nodded. "The compass hasn't been working for hours." Behind us, Marco joined the conversation, his tone light but his words sharp. "A broken compass? How quaint. Maybe we'll navigate by the stars." Before I could respond, a faint mist began to rise from the water, swirling around the ship like ghostly fingers. The crew's chatter ceased, replaced by the low hum of the engine and the rhythmic creak of the hull. That night, the first strange event occurred. I woke to the sound of faint whispers, a language I couldn't understand murmuring just beyond the edge of hearing. I stumbled to the deck, half expecting to find one of the crew. Instead, I found Ava standing near the railing, her face pale. "You hear it too?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the whispers. I nodded, gripping the railing to steady myself. The mist had thickened, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes moving within it, shadows that flickered and danced like firelight. By morning the whispers were gone, but the crew was uneasy. Marco dismissed their concerns with a wave of his hand. "Superstitious nonsense," he said. "We're probably just near a magnetic anomaly." "Or something else entirely," Ava muttered, her eyes scanning the mist. 2 days later, the island appeared. It rose from the water like a jagged crown, its cliffs shrouded in mist and its peaks glowing faintly in the fading light. The air grew thick as we approached, heavy with a scent I couldn't place. A mix of salt, earth, and something sweeter, almost intoxicating. "This is it," Ava whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Marco stood beside her, his expression one of barely contained excitement. "Think of what we'll find. Relics, treasure, history." But as I stared at the island, I couldn't shake the unease building in my chest. The whispers returned, louder now, their cadence urgent and insistent. "Turn back or be tested." I tightened my grip on the railing, my resolve hardening. "We've come too far to turn back," I said, more to myself than anyone else. The ship's engines sputtered as we drew closer, the mist thickening around us like a living thing. The crew's nervous murmurs filled the air, but I barely heard them. My eyes were locked on the shore, where the jagged rocks gave way to a pristine beach. The lost island had found us.